The hotel lobby sparkled like a palace. Chandeliers hung like frozen fireworks from the ceiling, golden light reflecting off the marble floors. Every sound, the soft clicking of heels, the polite hum of greetings, the faint jazz music playing, from hidden speakers, gave the Renaissance Vista Hotel a sense of elegance and calm. Guests wheeled their silver suitcases past velvet ropes. Staff in tailored uniforms moved swiftly behind the front desk, and flower arrangements the size of bicycles rested on glossy side tables. And then came Malik Johnson. 12 years old, barely. Reaching the counter, wearing his best white shirt, his tucked-in navy pants, and sneakers so clean they looked brand new. His backpack sat snug on his shoulders. In his small hands, he clutched a modest bouquet of red roses, bought with allowance, birthday money, and a little help from his aunt. He wasn't supposed to be nervous, but he was. He stood for a second just inside the grand entrance, feeling the cold air brush against his cheeks, the contrast to the summer heat outside. He took a deep breath. Today was his mother's birthday. He had planned it for 3 weeks, watching YouTube videos on surprise gifts, learning how to make reservations, even practicing what he would say in front of the bathroom mirror at night. All he wanted was to check in before she arrived. Place. The roses on the bed. Leave the card. And wait with a smile when she opened the door to her hotel suite, a smile that would say, "Happy birthday, Mom. I did this all by myself." That was the plan. Malik stepped up to the front desk, unsure of which line was which. A woman in a blue suit with a tight bun and a pin that read, "Heather, Hotel Manager," stood at the leftmost counter. She looked down at him with narrowed eyes before he could even speak. "Lost and found is over there," she said, gesturing with her chin without a smile. Malik blinked, confused. No, I'm not looking for lost stuff," he said politely, raising the flowers. "I'm here to check in early. I have the reservation number." Heather's eyebrows lifted sharply. "You have a reservation?" she asked as though she hadn't heard him right. "Yes, ma'am," Malik replied. "For my mom. It's under Danielle Johnson. She's flying in later. I came early to surprise her." Heather folded her arms. "Is that so?" Malik nodded. "I have the email and confirmation I can show you." He unzipped the front of his backpack carefully, trying not to crush the flowers, and pulled out a printout his aunt had helped him make. He smoothed it on the counter. Heather didn't look at it. Instead, she gave him a look Malik didn't understand, a tight frown, the kind his teacher sometimes gave to noisy kids in class. "And where exactly did you get this?" she asked coldly. "My aunt helped me print it," Malik said, keeping his voice polite. "And the roses?" she asked, her voice louder now. "Where'd you steal them from? The gift shop?" Malik's mouth fell open, stunned. "No, I bought them with my own money." She leaned forward as if inspecting his face. "Look, kid, you're not fooling anyone. You don't belong in here, okay? This is a 5-star hotel, not a school fundraiser." Malik's stomach twisted. This wasn't what he expected. He had practiced being polite. He had saved money. He had done everything right. "Please," he said. "My mom is a guest here. She always stays at this hotel when she travels for work. I just want to surprise her." Heather snatched the paper off the counter. "This isn't even a valid confirmation," she said, waving it like it was trash. "You could have made this in Word. You think I haven't seen scams before?" "I'm not scamming anyone," Malik said, louder now, panic creeping in. "You can check the name. She's a member, like VIP or something, Danielle Johnson. It should be on your computer." But Heather didn't look. She crossed her arms and motioned to a younger receptionist behind her. "Call security," she said coldly. "We've got a problem." "No, wait," Malik pleaded. "Please just call my mom or let me." Heather's face hardened. "I said enough." Within minutes, 2 large security guards walked briskly into the lobby. They looked confused at first, then spotted Malik. The taller one frowned. This the situation? Yes, Heather said, folding her arms. He claims he's here with a reservation, but none of it checks out. He's likely trying to gain access to the rooms, probably to steal or snoop. Malik gasped. I'm not trying to steal anything. The shorter guard stepped forward. Son, we're going to need to ask you to leave. This is private property. But I didn't do anything wrong, Malik cried. Please, just call my mom. She'll tell you. Time to go, the taller one interrupted. Heather, now emboldened, crossed behind the counter and picked up the phone again. I'm calling the police. Let them sort this out. Malik's hands trembled. He had never been in trouble before, never been sent to the principal's office, never been yelled at by a stranger. And now they were calling the cops? On him? He pulled out his phone. His fingers were shaking too much to unlock it on the first try. Finally, he typed a message and hit send. Mom, please help. They think I'm lying. I'm at the hotel. They're calling the police. Across the city, high above a glass skyscraper, Danielle Johnson stood in a boardroom overlooking the skyline. Her phone buzzed quietly in her purse, unnoticed. She was in the middle of a leadership conference with 17 other top executives. She stood at the head of the room, mid-presentation, with a sleek laptop in one hand and a smart clicker in the other. I believe hospitality means more than comfort, Danielle was saying. It means recognition, respect, trust. If a guest walks into one of our properties and doesn't feel seen... Her phone buzzed again. She frowned and paused. Glancing toward her purse, she gestured to her assistant, who quickly retrieved the phone and handed it to her. Danielle saw the text. She read it once. Then again. The room went silent. She didn't say a word for a long moment. Then she placed the clicker down on the table. Excuse me, she said to the room, her voice calm but tight. I need to leave immediately. But Ms. Johnson, one of the board members started. My son, she said sharply, already walking out the door, is being profiled at one of our hotels, the very chain I run. A hush fell over the boardroom. Back at the hotel, Malik sat on a small bench near the entrance, his bouquet of roses crushed in his lap. He tried not to cry, but his face was wet. The security guard stood nearby, arms crossed, waiting for police. People passed through the lobby watching him. Some frowned. Some looked away. No one helped. He kept whispering to himself, like a prayer. Please come, Mom. Please come. Then the hotel's automatic doors parted. In walked a woman in a steel gray suit, flanked by 2 bodyguards. Her heels clicked against the marble. She was tall, sharp-eyed, and calm, but the kind of calm that made everyone around her nervous. Danielle Johnson. Malik saw her and broke into tears. Mom! Danielle rushed to him, pulled him into her arms, then turned toward the hotel staff with an expression colder than glass. Who? She asked quietly. Called the police on my son. Heather stepped forward, still smug. Ma'am, I don't know who you are, but this boy was caught trespassing and pretending to have a reservation. He claims his mother. I am his mother, Danielle interrupted. Heather's face paled. And not only am I his mother, Danielle added, stepping closer, I am also the CEO of this hotel chain, which means everything that just happened here, every assumption, every insult, every decision, is now mine to investigate. Heather's mouth dropped open. Danielle turned to the security guards. Release my son. Immediately. And someone. Find the regional director. We're about to have a conversation this hotel will never forget. Danielle's voice echoed across the wide marble lobby like the sound of a sudden storm. Every eye in the hotel turned toward her. Bellhops paused mid-step. A woman at the front desk quietly lowered her phone. The jazz music playing from the A. Speakers faded into the background as if even it had grown quiet out of respect. Heather Langford took a step back from the counter, suddenly feeling the weight of what was happening. Wait, she said, her voice faltering. You're saying, you're... Yes, Danielle said, stepping closer. Danielle Johnson, CEO of Renaissance Vista Hotels, and this is my son. She gestured toward Malik, who was now wiping his face with the sleeve of his shirt, trying to calm his breathing. The roses he had bought lay on the ground, petals bruised and bent. His backpack hung from one shoulder, and his small hands clenched into fists. Danielle's eyes swept over the scene like a detective scanning a crime scene. The ruined flowers, her son's swollen eyes, the security guards who still hadn't moved, the front desk staff looking guilty, and the smirk that had vanished from Heather's lips like a candle blown out. Danielle turned to the taller security guard. "Uncuff him," she ordered. He shifted nervously. "He's not cuffed, ma'am. We didn't detain him physically, just kept him near the entrance to await—" "To await police?" Danielle snapped. "To wait for humiliation? To wait for fear? Did anyone ask to verify his story? Did anyone call the reservation number to check if he was telling the truth?" There was silence. Then Heather tried again. He was alone. He had no ID. He was carrying cash and flowers. I had no idea who he was. We've had situations before with people sneaking in. "You mean black children?" Danielle said bluntly. "You've had situations with black children, walking into nice hotels, carrying flowers." Heather looked around desperately, but there was nowhere to escape. Guests were watching, some were filming, others were whispering. One elderly woman mouthed the words, "Good for her." Danielle gently placed a hand on Malik's shoulder and turned toward him. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. Malik nodded, but his voice was still small. "I tried to tell them, Mom. I had the reservation. I had the flowers. I showed the paper, but she wouldn't look." Danielle's jaw tightened. Heather reached for her computer, her hands shaking. "I can check the reservation now," she said weakly. "Maybe there was—" Danielle raised her hand. "Don't bother." She reached into her purse and took out a leather card holder. From it, she pulled a black and gold access card that read, "Global Executive Access, Danielle Johnson." She slid it across the counter slowly. Heather looked at it as if it were glowing. Then her eyes darted back to Danielle's face. Recognition began to take shape. Memories of business newsletters, stockholder updates, internal memos. Danielle Johnson, the new CEO who had taken over after the retirement of founder. Peter Madigan, the one who had been praised for modernizing the brand, pushing for more diversity, changing outdated policies, and appearing on the cover of Business Today with the headline, "The Woman Who's Redefining Hospitality." And now she stood before her, not in a magazine or behind a screen, but in person, and furious. Danielle picked up the crushed roses from the floor and examined them silently. Then she turned back to Heather. "Tell me exactly what my son said to you," Heather stammered. "He said he was here to check in early. He claimed he had a reservation under your name and said it was a surprise. He had some printed sheet, but I thought it was fake. He had no ID and he's a child. I just thought it didn't add up." "And what about when he asked to call me?" Danielle asked. Heather didn't answer. Danielle looked to the younger receptionist behind the desk. "What's your name?" The woman blinked. "Amy. Amy Ruiz." "Did you try to verify my son's story, Amy?" Amy hesitated, then spoke quietly. "No, ma'am. Heather told me not to. She said it was protocol." "Protocol?" Danielle repeated, like she was tasting a bitter word. "Is it also protocol to accuse children of theft without evidence? To threaten them with arrest over flowers and a reservation number?" Amy looked down. The taller security guard stepped forward again. "Ma'am, if I may, we didn't want—" "Any trouble. We were just following orders. The manager said she had it under control." "Clearly," Danielle said, her voice cold. "I'll be speaking to your head of security and legal." At that moment, a short, breathless man in a maroon tie ran in from a hallway off the lobby. "Ms. Johnson," he exclaimed. "We just got the call. Please accept my apologies. I'm George Barrington, the regional director for this property." Danielle turned slowly. Mr. Barrington, you arrived faster than the police your staff called. Impressive. His face flushed. This shouldn't have happened. You're right, Danielle replied. It shouldn't have, but it did. And I want every security camera file for the last 90 minutes. I want every voice recording, and I want to see the incident report Heather was planning to file. Now. Of course, he said, nearly bowing. Right away. Danielle looked back at Malik. Did they ever even look at your documents? She asked him softly. Malik nodded slowly. I tried to show them, but they just kept saying I was lying, that I was pretending. Danielle turned to the desk again. Let me be clear, she said, her voice now calm but razor-sharp. My son is 12 years old. He walked into this hotel with manners, flowers, and a printed reservation. And your manager saw a threat, not a child, not a guest, not a son, a threat. Based on what? His skin? His age? His courage to do something kind? Heather tried again, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't mean it that way. You didn't have to mean it, Danielle said. Your actions spoke louder than anything you could ever say. Silence returned to the lobby. The air had grown heavy. Some guests had stopped pretending they weren't listening. A man in a navy blazer stood still, holding his briefcase. A mother whispered something to her teenage daughter. Someone was crying quietly nearby. Danielle placed a hand gently on Malik's back. We're leaving for now, she said. But this isn't over. She turned and walked with him toward the doors, security and staff parting like water as they passed. Malik looked up at his mom, eyes still red but filled with awe. He had never seen her like this. He had known she was strong, but this was different. This was power. As the heavy glass doors opened and they stepped out into the sunlight, Malik whispered, Mom, were you scared? Danielle looked down at him and smiled sadly. No, sweetheart. I was angry. Because you should never have to be afraid in a place I helped build. In a place that's supposed to welcome everyone. She took his hand. And now, she added, we're going to make sure no other kid ever has to go through what you just did. The car was silent as it drove through the city. But inside the sleek black vehicle, a storm was building. Danielle Johnson sat straight in the back seat, her phone glowing dimly in her hand. Malik was seated beside her, staring down at the crushed roses in his lap. Not a word passed between them for several minutes. Danielle didn't speak because she couldn't trust her voice. Not yet. The image of her son sitting on a bench, frightened, surrounded by strangers who treated him like a criminal would not leave her mind. His little shoulders, so strong and small, shaking with confusion. His big brown eyes filled with shame. The very thought burned in her chest like fire. She had faced hostile boardrooms. She had negotiated billion-dollar mergers. She had stood before CEOs twice her age and refused to back down. But nothing had ever made her feel the kind of fury she felt in that hotel lobby when she realized her child had been profiled and humiliated. The driver glanced at her through the rearview mirror. Ms. Johnson, he said gently, are we heading to corporate? No, she replied without looking up. Take us to the private suite tower. I want my son to rest. Then I want the incident files, and I want legal on the line in 15 minutes. Yes, ma'am. Malik finally spoke, his voice barely more than a whisper. Mom? Danielle turned toward him instantly. Yes, baby. He looked at her, his eyes wide. Was it because I'm black? Her heart cracked. She reached for his hand and held it tightly. Yes, she said softly, not hiding the truth. Yes, it was. And that's not okay. But you didn't do anything wrong. You hear me? You did everything right. Malik blinked, back tears. I just wanted to surprise you. I know, she whispered. And it was the most beautiful surprise anyone could give me. Malik turned back to the window, his voice quiet. She called the police like I was dangerous. I didn't yell. I said, please. I even brought the paper. Danielle leaned in and kissed the top of his head. That's because she never saw you. She saw her fears, her hate, not you. But everyone else is going to see you now, and they're going to see me too. Malik looked up at her. What do you mean? Danielle's expression sharpened. I mean I'm going to fix this, not just for you, but for every kid who's ever been treated the same way. Inside her private suite, high above the city, Danielle moved with focus and fury. Malik lay curled on the oversized couch under a soft blanket, drifting off to sleep as her assistants entered quietly. Her top attorney, Melinda Kravitz, walked in first, heels clicking on the floor. You called? Melinda asked, her tone already alert. Danielle nodded. He was profiled. My son, 12 years old. Tried to check in with a reservation in my name. They accused him of fraud, threatened to call the police, and refused to verify his identity. All on camera. Melinda blinked. The Vista property? Yes, Danielle said. Heather Langford, hotel manager. She called security before asking one question. I want her suspended immediately, and I want an internal investigation across all properties. Melinda sat down, opening her laptop. We'll need the footage. I already requested it, Danielle replied. Have corporate compliance pull the entire surveillance log from the past 3 hours. I want it archived. If they even try to erase a second of it, we file obstruction. Understood, Melinda said, fingers flying across the keyboard. Danielle's head of security, Marcus Evans, entered next. A tall man with a steady voice, he had been with Danielle's family for 10 years. He didn't ask questions, just stood at her side, ready. I want the names of every guest and employee present at the front desk during the incident, Danielle said. If there are witnesses, I want to talk to them. You got it, Marcus replied. Danielle paced to the window and looked out at the night skyline. Lights sparkled like stars, but all she could see was the moment Malik looked up at her with that broken voice. Was it because I'm black? She took a deep breath and turned around. We're not just reacting, she said. We're setting a new standard. Melinda looked up. What do you have in mind? Danielle walked over to the glass table and placed her hands flat against it. This isn't just about Heather. It's about how the system allowed her behavior to feel normal. She thought she was protecting the hotel, but what she was doing was protecting her prejudice. Melinda nodded. So, we're looking at corporate reform? No, Danielle said. We're looking at revolution. Back at the Vista Hotel, Heather Langford sat in her office, her face pale. Her hands trembled as she read the urgent email. From HR. Urgent notice. Effective immediately, hotel manager Heather Langford is placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Please arrange interim management coverage and restrict all media access. CEO Johnson is taking direct oversight. She stared at the screen, heart racing. She had heard of Danielle Johnson, of course. Everyone had. But it never occurred to her that the boy she dismissed, who wore no expensive suit, who was small and polite and black, could be her son. Heather had worked in hospitality for 15 years. She had climbed from front desk assistant to hotel manager through hard work and experience. But deep down, she also knew the truth. She had made assumptions that afternoon. Ugly ones, dangerous ones. And now it was all catching up to her. She walked to the mini fridge, poured herself a glass of water, and tried to steady her shaking fingers. But nothing would stop the feeling in her chest that a bomb had gone off and the pieces of her career were falling around her like ash. Meanwhile, Danielle wasn't finished. She was on the phone with the chairman of the board by sunrise. Michael, she said, her voice cool but charged. This isn't about bad optics. This is about trust. Our brand can't survive if we let our own properties turn into places where kids like my son are treated like criminals. Danielle, he said, this is terrible. I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't fix it, she replied. Change does. I agree, Michael said quickly. What do you need from the board? Danielle didn't hesitate. I want full authority to audit every guest services department. I want mandatory anti-bias training across all properties by the end of the quarter. I want our youth guest policy rewritten, and I want Heather Langford fired before lunchtime. Michael took a breath. That's a lot to move at once. No, Danielle said. What's a lot is watching my son nearly handcuffed in a building. That bears my name while employees smile and do nothing. Michael nodded. Understood. You have my support. Danielle leaned back and closed her eyes for a second. She felt tired. More tired than she had in years. But the kind of tired that gave you purpose. Because this wasn't just about a reservation. It was about dignity. It was about showing every Malik in every city that someone was fighting for them. Later that day, media outlets started catching wind of the story. It hadn't gone viral yet, but a few Twitter videos had gained traction, showing a woman in a gray suit demanding justice in a hotel lobby. The hashtags "Narm CEO" and "Mom and Malik deserves" better began to appear. Danielle ignored them all. She wasn't doing this for headlines, she was doing it for her son. That afternoon, she sat with Malik on their balcony overlooking the city. Are they going to jail? Malik asked quietly. No, Danielle said. Not jail. But they're going to lose what matters to them. Jobs, reputation, the ability to hurt someone else like that again. Malik nodded slowly. Are you mad at me? Danielle turned to him, horrified. Why would I be mad at you? Because I didn't leave. I tried to explain, but they didn't listen. Maybe I should have just gone. Danielle knelt beside him, cupping his face in her hands. No, she said firmly. You stood your ground. You were brave. You stayed calm. You were more professional than the people paid to be. I'm so proud of you. Malik looked down, but it still hurt. Danielle kissed his forehead. Yes, and that's why I'm going to make sure it never happens again. She stood up and walked back inside. Because tomorrow, she wasn't just going to lead a company. She was going to lead a movement. The next morning arrived with a strange stillness in the city, as if the buildings themselves were holding their breath. Inside the Renaissance Vista Hotel, the staff was on edge. Emails had gone out. Managers were summoned for emergency meetings. An HR consultant arrived unannounced. Phones rang more than usual. Guests murmured in the lobby. Everyone knew something was coming. They just didn't know how big it would be. And then, the black SUVs rolled up, 5 of them. Tinted windows, sleek, silent, deliberate. They didn't park at the main entrance. They rolled to the executive driveway and stopped in a perfect line like a formation of chess pieces. Doors opened all at once. Danielle Johnson stepped out first. She wore a tailored black suit, no jewelry, no makeup, beyond a sharp line of eyeliner and clear gloss. Her hair was pulled back into a tight bun. Every movement was crisp, intentional, and powerful. She looked like a general ready for war. Behind her came Melinda Kravitz with her legal briefcase, 2 executive assistants with tablets, and Marcus Evans, her chief of security. No one spoke. They didn't need to. Their presence was louder than words. Inside the hotel, every camera turned. Hotel guests paused their breakfasts. The concierge stopped mid-call. Even the doorman stepped aside without a word. Danielle didn't. Slow her pace. Her heels echoed across the marble lobby. Tap, tap, tap. Each step sounded like a countdown. Tap, tap, tap. Like justice marching in rhythm. Heather Langford stood behind the front desk trying to look composed. She had been told to remain on site until the investigation was concluded. She had considered calling in sick, but her pride told her to stay. Now she wished she hadn't. Danielle walked straight toward the counter, her eyes locked on Heather's. She didn't flinch. She didn't blink. "You erased footage," she said. Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It carried the weight of authority, of a mother, of a CEO with no more patience. Heather swallowed. "I didn't erase anything. That's not—" "You erased the interaction between you and my son," Danielle interrupted. "But you forgot about the cloud backup." Melinda stepped forward and tapped her tablet. "We have a mirrored copy of all surveillance footage from the last 48 hours, backed up automatically to corporate cloud servers. We reviewed it this morning." Heather turned pale. Danielle nodded to Marcus. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a slim laptop, setting it gently on the counter and opening it. The screen lit up. There, in grainy black and white footage, played a clip from the day before. It showed Malik walking in, smiling shyly, clutching his flowers. It showed Heather's face tightening the moment she saw him. It showed her refusing to look at his reservation printout, her sneer, her angry phone call to security. It showed Malik backing away, scared. It showed everything. A group of guests had begun to gather nearby. Some were recording. One woman whispered, "That's the CEO, that's the boy's mom." Danielle turned the laptop so everyone behind her could see. "Take a good look," she said. "This is what racial profiling looks like in real time." Heather's hands trembled. "I didn't mean to. I thought maybe he didn't look—" Danielle cut her off. "He didn't look like what? A guest? A child? A human being?" Heather's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Danielle leaned in just slightly. "You didn't just humiliate a child. You humiliated my son. You called security on a 12-year-old trying to surprise his mother with birthday flowers. And worse, you assumed he didn't belong. Why? Because he was alone? Or because he was black?" Heather looked down. Danielle stood straight and addressed the lobby. This hotel was built on the promise of hospitality, on the idea that everyone deserves dignity and welcome. Yesterday, that promise was broken. Not just by one person, but by a culture that allowed this to happen. She turned to Marcus. "Get Mr. Barrington on speaker." Marcus tapped his earpiece. After a moment, a voice echoed through the lobby. The hotel's regional director. "Yes, Ms. Johnson?" "You have your answer," Danielle said. "Terminate Heather Langford's employment immediately. Then prepare a press release. We're not hiding this. We're leading with it." "Yes, ma'am," Heather gasped. "Wait, please. I've worked here for 10 years. And in 10 seconds, Danielle said, you threw it all away." 2 security guards approached. This time, they were there for Heather. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. As Heather was quietly escorted from the building, Danielle turned to the watching guests and employees. This is not just about one hotel. This is about every child who's ever been told they don't belong. Every person who's been judged before they spoke. Every guest who's been ignored or insulted because they didn't look like what someone expected. She walked toward the center of the lobby and looked around. From this moment on, the Renaissance Vista Hotel will lead the industry in anti-bias reform. We are rolling out a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination. Every employee, from doorman to director, will complete mandatory equity training. Every youth guest will be treated with respect. And if a child asks to call their parent, you hand them a phone. You don't call the police. Applause broke out across the lobby. Quiet at first, then stronger, then rising. Danielle took a deep breath. "Justice doesn't begin in courtrooms," she said. "It begins in lobbies, in classrooms, in every space where someone chooses to see or chooses not to." She turned and walked toward the elevator, her team following. Behind her, guests stood taller. Employees blinked back tears. One man whispered to his daughter, "That's what a leader looks like." Upstairs in the executive conference room, Danielle sat with her legal and HR teams. The footage continued to play on a larger screen, but now they were examining past incidents. Heather wasn't the only one. Melinda pointed to a file. In the last 3 years, 84% of guest complaints involving suspicious behavior came from staff toward Black or Latino guests. 67% of those guests were under the age of 18. Danielle nodded. We don't need better training. We need better truth. People need to see what bias looks like, so they can't deny it anymore. They began drafting what Danielle would later call the Malik Protocol, a set of internal protections for minor guests, including the right to contact a parent or guardian without interference, a second manager review before calling, law enforcement on any guest under 18, a standard dignity policy for all staff interactions. It wasn't just PR, it was revolution. Later that afternoon, Danielle sat with Malik again. He was quieter now, still confused by the attention, but more at peace. They fired her? He asked. Danielle nodded. Yes, but we're doing more than that. Malik looked down at his hands. It still hurts, though. Danielle wrapped her arms around him. I know, sweetheart, but you turned that pain into power. Do you know what that means? He shook his head. It means you changed something, she said. For someone else. That's what real strength is. The next 24 hours moved faster than anyone could have predicted. What began as a quiet act of racism in a lobby had now exploded into national attention. Videos of Danielle Johnson's confrontation at the Renaissance Vista Hotel had been posted online, not just by guests, but by employees, too. And those videos didn't just go viral. They ignited something. On TikTok, the clip of Danielle saying, "Justice doesn't begin in courtrooms. It begins in lobbies," hit 1 million views in a matter of hours. Instagram Reels repeated the moment she demanded Heather's firing. Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, the story was everywhere. Justice for Malik, CEO and mom, and Black kids belong, trended across multiple platforms. But the real impact wasn't just in the hashtags. It was in the hotel inboxes flooded with messages of support. It was in the phone calls from civil rights leaders, parents, teachers, and community advocates. It was in the faces of the staff who had once looked the other way and now couldn't look away at all. Inside corporate headquarters, Danielle Johnson stood at the center of it all, calm but firm, directing every move like a maestro. She hadn't slept much, but adrenaline kept her focused. Her staff moved like clockwork around her, sending memos, fielding interviews, drafting press statements. In the war room, a large conference room temporarily converted into a command center, her legal team and crisis consultants gathered. Melinda Kravitz, her top attorney, read from a stack of documents. We've received 3 letters of support from local school boards. The mayor's office called to schedule a meeting, and we've had 10 families reach out privately with stories almost identical to Malik's. Danielle nodded slowly. Get me the details on those families, every one of them. I want to speak to them personally. Marcus Evans, her head of security, added, We've also found 6 previous incidents reported at Vista locations in the last 18 months involving minors. Most were dismissed without follow-up. Danielle looked out the tall glass windows at the city below. And how many didn't even file reports? Melinda didn't answer. She didn't have to. Danielle turned back to the room. We're not sweeping this under the rug. We're pulling the rug up and showing the dust underneath. If our hotels have patterns of behavior like this, we need to face them. Meanwhile, inside a small HR conference room at the hotel, Heather Langford sat alone. Her hair, usually perfect, was messy, her face pale. Her hands kept fidgeting, a nervous habit she hadn't done in years. She still wore her hotel blazer, but it looked out of place now. Heavy, stiff, a human resources official sat across from her, quiet, professional. Heather, he began gently, we reviewed the footage, the guest complaints, and your incident reports from the past year. Heather nodded slowly. I was just doing my job. The man hesitated. Was it your job to accuse a child without verifying facts? Heather looked down. I didn't mean to, she whispered. He didn't look like... Like what? The man asked. She didn't finish the sentence. We've also found, he continued, that your complaint logs show a pattern. Out of 41 guests flagged as suspicious by you over the past year, 32 were black or Latino. Only 3 were white. Can you explain that? Heather's eyes filled with tears. I didn't even notice. That, the man said quietly, is part of the problem. After 20 minutes, the HR manager slid a paper across the table. This is your formal termination. Effective immediately. You'll be escorted out of the building. We advise you not to speak to the press. Any personal belongings will be mailed. Heather didn't argue. She stood, numb, and walked toward the hallway where security waited. The same hallway where she had once walked with confidence, past guests and employees who nodded in respect. Now, no one met her eyes. It was all gone. 20 years of hospitality. One decision. A ruined legacy. But Danielle wasn't done. At a press conference that afternoon, she stood before a row of reporters in a navy suit, her son seated quietly behind her. This isn't just about my child, she said, her voice strong. This is about a system that's been quietly hurting children like him for far too long. And now that it's visible, we're going to fix it. She announced a new initiative, Vista Forward, a reform package that would reshape hotel policies nationwide. It included bias response training for every employee, a child guest dignity protocol, guest protection cards for minors staying alone, an anonymous guest experience hotline, mandatory reviews of all past complaints involving minors reporters, raised hands, microphones pointed forward. Ms. Johnson, one asked, are you afraid of backlash? No, she said simply. I'm afraid of silence. That's what hurts us most. That night, while the media buzzed and corporate teams hustled, Malik sat on the floor of their suite with a notebook and colored pencils. He was drawing, a picture of himself, holding flowers, standing in front of the hotel. Danielle saw it and smiled. What's that? Malik held it up. It's me. If they had believed me. Danielle knelt beside him, her eyes softening. That's a beautiful picture. He looked at her. Are you really going to change everything? All the hotels? She nodded. We already started. He smiled faintly. Do I get to help? Danielle raised her eyebrows. Help? You're the reason we're doing it. He looked back down at the drawing. Then I want to call it something. What? She asked. He thought for a moment. The Malik Promise. Danielle felt her throat tighten. She reached out and hugged him. You got it, kiddo, she whispered. The Malik Promise. By the next morning, it was official. Emails went out to 400 Vista properties worldwide. Mandatory anti-bias training was announced. Danielle's letter was shared with every staff member in the system. If a child walks into our hotel, we see a guest, not a threat, not a suspicion, not a problem, a guest. The moment we forget that, we forget who we are. New posters went up. New training modules launched. Every guest services manager was scheduled for a virtual town hall with Danielle, herself. No excuses, no delays. Meanwhile, Heather Langford's story became a cautionary tale. Her name was quietly removed from all Vista property listings. Her LinkedIn profile, once filled with hospitality awards, now sat abandoned. Friends stopped calling. Former co-workers unfollowed her on social media. But more than shame, Heather began to feel something else. Reflection. Alone in her apartment, she watched the video of Malik at the press conference, sitting behind his mother, quiet, strong, brave. She wept, not just for what she'd lost, but for the boy she never saw. Days passed, but the story refused to fade. Across the country, the name Malik Johnson was on everyone's lips. but not as a victim, as a symbol, a reminder of the child in the lobby, of the power of a mother who refused to stay silent, of what happens when dignity is denied, and then defended. TV anchors praised Danielle Johnson's leadership. Parents wrote letters, teachers played her press conference in classrooms, and Malik's quiet drawing of himself holding flowers in front of the hotel was posted by news outlets, retweeted by celebrities, and printed on the cover of Time with the headline, "The Boy Who Made the System See Him." But while the world watched, Danielle worked. She didn't care about the cameras. She cared about what happened behind them. Inside her headquarters, a massive project was taking shape, the Malik Promise Initiative, a detailed, company-wide policy that would permanently change how minors and marginalized guests were treated across every Renaissance Vista hotel. She began every morning at 5 a.m., no makeup. Coffee in one hand, legal papers in the other. Her boardroom was filled not just with executives, but with social workers, youth advocates, civil rights attorneys, and former hospitality staff who had once walked away from the industry because they were tired of being unseen. Start from the guest's perspective, Danielle instructed. Imagine being 13 again, alone, nervous. You walk in holding flowers, and the first thing someone asks is if you're lost. How do we fix that? The team got to work. They started small, with words. Staff training guides were rewritten. Scripts for front desk greetings were updated to include welcoming language for youth guests. Gone were the cold phrases like, "What's your business here?" and "Are you sure you're at the right place?" In their place, "Welcome," and "How can I help you feel at home today?" Next came procedures. From now on, any employee faced with a minor making a transaction, whether checking in early, reporting a lost item, or even just asking for directions, had to follow the 3 steps of respect: acknowledge, speak, directly to the child, make eye contact, say their name if they give it, verify. Before judging, check the system, look up names, review IDs, ask questions, protect. If the child is distressed, offer them a phone to contact their guardian. No police calls without first verifying facts and speaking with a supervisor. It sounded simple, but it was radical. Why? Because it forced adults, especially those in power, to treat children with dignity. No more assumptions. No more bias disguised as security. Danielle wasn't satisfied until she saw role-playing sessions rolled out at every property. Actors were hired to play out real-life scenarios, including the one Malik had endured. Staff were scored not just on policy, but on empathy. If your voice sounds annoyed, you fail, Danielle said. If you don't make eye contact, you fail. If you see fear and ignore it, you fail. Meanwhile, Malik had returned to school, where things felt different now. His classmates, once more interested in video games and lunch swaps, now treated him like he was someone important. Some asked for autographs. Some hugged him. One boy who had never spoken to him before walked up in the cafeteria and said, "You're the reason my little brother wants to be a hotel manager now." Malik didn't quite know what to say to any of it. At home, he asked his mom, "Am I supposed to be famous now?" Danielle laughed gently. "You're not famous, baby. You're brave. That lasts longer." But not everything was easy. There were critics. Internet trolls who accused Danielle of overreacting. People who said the policy was soft or unnecessary. Some hotel investors threatened to pull funding, afraid that acknowledging systemic bias would hurt their image. Danielle met with them one by one. "You think it hurts your image?" she asked calmly. "You know what really hurts? A child being handcuffed in your lobby? That's your brand now, unless you fix it." Some investors walked away. More joined. The tipping point came when Danielle partnered with 3 other hotel chains, her former competitors, and offered to share the entire Malik Promise framework for free. No child should have to prove they belong, Danielle said at the joint announcement. Not just in hotels, anywhere. The movement spread. Restaurants added similar policies. Airlines reviewed their treatment of unaccompanied minors. Museums, libraries, and shopping malls began publishing youth guest charters, and slowly, quietly, a ripple of change moved through the service industry. One afternoon, Danielle and Malik were invited to speak at a national hospitality conference in Chicago. It was a giant ballroom filled with hundreds of hotel executives, travel managers, and service leaders. Malik wore a new blazer, navy blue, just like his mother's. He stood nervously at the side of the stage. Danielle placed a hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to say much," she whispered. "Just be you." When it was their turn, Danielle walked to the podium first. She told the story plainly. No dramatics, no overstatements. "My son tried to surprise me with flowers," she said. "He was 12. He had a reservation number. He was polite. But someone looked at him and didn't see a child, didn't see a guest, didn't even see a person. And that moment, that pause in someone's heart, that's where injustice begins." She paused. "Today, that pause ends here." Then she motioned to Malik. He stepped up slowly, looked out at the crowd, took a deep breath. "My name is Malik Johnson," he said, his voice soft but clear. "I used to think hotels were just buildings with fancy pillows, but now I know they're places where people come to rest. And people like me deserve to rest, too." Silence. Then, thunderous applause. Back in their hotel suite that night, Danielle and Malik lay side by side on the bed, staring at the ceiling. "Mom," he said after a while, "what if I never walked into that hotel?" She thought for a moment. Then someone else would have, and maybe they wouldn't have had someone to speak for them. He turned his head toward her. "But I had you," she smiled. "And now, the world does too." 1 year later, spring returned to the city, not with a quiet bloom, but with a proud celebration. The skyline glowed in the late afternoon sun, streets buzzed with life, and near the center of downtown, a crowd had gathered in front of a freshly renovated building. Banners fluttered in the breeze, each printed with the same words in bold gold letters. The Malik Center for Guest Dignity and Inclusion. Powered by the Malik Promise. Initiative children stood at the front row, dressed in school uniforms, waving small signs that read, "You belong." Local news crews positioned cameras along the sidewalk. Hotel staff from properties across the state wore matching pins, tiny roses, a quiet nod to the boy who once held a crushed bouquet in a lobby and still stood tall. At the center of the ceremony, a stage had been set up, modest but dignified. Balloons curled at its edges. A polished podium stood beneath a white archway of flowers, and sitting in the front row, wearing a navy suit and a determined smile, was Malik Johnson. Now 13, Malik had changed in ways only time and experience could shape. He still looked like the same thoughtful boy. But there was something in his eyes now, a calm strength, a quiet fire. Not from fame, not from praise, but from understanding the weight of what he had lived through and what it had inspired. Danielle stood beside him, her hand gently resting on his shoulder. He looked up at her. "Do you think it really helped?" "Mom?" She smiled. "Look around, baby. This didn't exist a year ago, but now it does. Because you walked into that hotel and didn't run away." Malik turned back to the stage. On it stood several community leaders, civil rights advocates, and 3 children who had once written letters saying, "Thank you for making me feel seen." The mayor stepped up to the microphone. "Today, we're not just opening a building," he said, his voice warm. "We're opening a future where no child is ever questioned for simply showing up. where flowers don't make someone suspicious, where dignity doesn't have to be earned, because it's already deserved. He looked directly at Malik, and we thank the young man who reminded all of us of that truth. The applause was long and deep. Then came Danielle. She didn't speak with notes. She didn't need them. When my son walked into that hotel a year ago, she began, he wasn't looking to change the world. He was looking to surprise his mother with flowers. Laughter rippled softly through the crowd. But the world didn't see a boy with flowers. It saw a threat, a stranger, a problem, because of the color of his skin, because of the assumptions in someone else's mind. And that moment, that ugly, painful moment, it became a mirror for all of us. She paused. My son cried in that lobby, and I cried later that night. Not just because of what happened, but because I realized how many Maliks have walked into places where they were never seen, where their names were doubted, their words dismissed, their hearts overlooked. Danielle looked out at the crowd, her voice rising. So we built something new. We took pain, and we planted it like a seed. Today, it blooms. This center will serve youth across the country. It will teach dignity, train hospitality workers, provide legal support, offer internships, and make sure every child knows you belong. The audience stood, clapping, some in tears. Then Danielle turned to her son. Malik, she said, her voice soft now. It's your ribbon to cut. Malik rose from his seat slowly, his cheeks pink with nervousness. A woman handed him a pair of gold-handled scissors. He walked to the ribbon stretched, across the entrance. Every eye followed him. He glanced over the crowd, then back at his mom. Then, with one quick snip, he cut the ribbon. A roar of applause filled the air. The Malik Center was open. Over the following months, the center became a beacon of change. Hotel chains across the country adopted the Malik Promise Protocol. Airlines asked Danielle's team to train flight crews. School districts invited Malik to speak at assemblies. A short documentary, The Boy with the Roses, aired on national television, winning an award for social impact. Malik became a voice not because he shouted, but because he spoke gently, clearly, and truthfully. When asked in interviews how it felt to have changed the industry, he always said the same thing. I didn't change the industry. I reminded it who it was supposed to be. But the story didn't end with applause or headlines. It continued in the quiet moments that no one filmed. A teenage girl at a hotel in Detroit who was finally offered help instead of suspicion when she asked for her room key. A black boy in Seattle who reported a lost wallet and was told, "Take your time. We believe you." A Latina child in Houston who was greeted by name, not with fear, but with a smile. Malik never met them, but they felt his legacy. One evening back home, Malik sat at the kitchen table doing homework. Danielle entered the room carrying a framed newspaper clipping, the one with his drawing on the front page. I had this sealed in glass, she said, setting it beside him. One day when you're older, maybe you'll hang it in your office. Malik grinned. Office? You never know, she said with a wink. Maybe you'll run this whole thing someday. He looked at the drawing again, himself standing with roses. But now he wasn't the only one in the picture. Someone had edited it. Now there were others, kids of all races, smiling beside him, standing with him, holding their own flowers. He touched the glass gently and whispered to himself, "No one gets left out again."